people, working out logically, based on the situation, the person's history, and other constraints, what's in someone's mind, that requires language. That requires being able to juxtapose concepts, to work out cause and effect. And so the reason that theory of mind is so highly correlated with language, probably it has to do with intelligence being involved with both, but also that language itself, particularly language for internal experiences, the language of feelings, the language of thoughts, the language of desires, that gives children kind of a concrete system that they can manipulate in order to do their theory of mind type calculations. So we've shown in a couple of different studies that those children whose parents tend to talk to them about inner experiences are higher on theory of mind reasoning compared to their peers. So parents vary in the extent to which they elucidate what's in people's minds. A good example was a study we did with a simple wordless picture book. Children in the lab sat with their parents and they read through this wordless picture book, and we analyzed the different narratives that came from that exercise for both the amount of theory of mind reasoning that parents spontaneously produced and the quality of it, the extent to which it was, it involved a lot of explanation and causal reasoning and multiple perspectives on things. And you won't be surprised to learn that those children whose parents were inputting a lot of social understanding in their narrative were children who were much higher on theory of mind compared to the others. So talk to your children about feelings, not just yours, not just theirs, everybody's, and talk about it in a way that really contextualizes it and brings it out. It's not enough to just label feelings. He feels sad, but explain it. He feels sad because his toy got broken and now he won't get to play with it anymore. That same study we replicated in dyads in which the child had autism. And of course, children with autism are diagnostically poor at both empathizing and theory of mind reasoning. But we found that the same relationship was there, in that the parents of the children with autism who were more explanatory and more fluent in their talk about mental states, their children, although performing far below typical children of the same age, were relatively good on the theory of mind tasks. We also know that having a child-age sibling impacts on theory of mind performance in young children. And this is really kind of a correlate of the first one. Ultimately, it's all about language. When you have a child-age sibling, then you get daily experience with someone having a different perspective. Child-age siblings are always having to fight over things, explain their perspectives. They may have to go to mom and explain their two perspectives in order to have it adjudicated. So the idea is that children who, ultimately it's all the same thing, children who get lots of verbal exposure to what's inside other people's minds are able to build a system that allows them to work out other people better, and this has flow-on effects for their social functioning. Again, this is true for children with autism, the fact of having a child-age sibling being related to theory of mind development. It's not quite as simple for the children with autism. It's a little bit more nuanced. Our PhD student, Karen O'Brien, is here with a poster. So if you want to know what are the details of that story, have a look at her poster in the next session. Now, we also look at precursors to theory of mind reasoning. We know from our own work and other people's work that children who are higher on theory of mind, when they're younger, they tend to pay attention to social partners, they tend to engage in a lot of joint activities, and they tend to be good at imitation. So these are all predictors we know from longitudinal studies that are related to earlier and more sophisticated theory of mind reasoning by the time the children get to be around 4 or 5 years old. So what we are looking at the moment in a 5-year longitudinal project is going back to the very, very, very beginning, looking at newborn imitation as the very first indicator of empathy and the capacity to resonate with another person. And then we're going to follow these babies for 2.5 years, looking at a number of different social cognitive milestones along the way. This is newborn imitation. If you haven't seen it before, this is little Lachlan. He's being tested by Janine Ostenbrook, who's a PhD student. Notice up at the top on the right-hand side, Janine's tongue will stick out. And Lachlan is paying exquisitely close attention. Lachlan's only a week old. Now he'll start to marshal his response. Takes them a while. They're not too coordinated. There we go. Okay, so our study is looking at whether that very, very earliest capacity for social engagement, first of all, if there are strong individual differences. In fact, we already know that there are, mainly from the fact that in the literature there's little agreement amongst research labs about whether or not neonatal imitation exists. We think it's probably an individual difference variable that's probably going to be continuous with other elements of empathy and social cognitive development. So as these babies get older, we're going to study their preferential attention to social versus mechanical stimuli. We're going to study their imitation. We're going to study their communicative skill. And ultimately, our prediction is that those babies who are like Lachlan in being really tuned in to other people from the beginning, they'll probably show strong empathy and theory of mind skills all the way through. This would be a really useful thing to find out because, as I said before, children who are on the back foot with respect to these skills have problems when they get to school. So if we could start to identify babies who are at risk even as early as the newborn period, then we could get in there with linguistic and other experiences to help them build their social understanding so that they're well equipped when they get to school. Thanks.